What's
Okay.
up, everybody? So this is Fixer. You already know me. This is Steg. Or well, do you want to?
Whatever you want to call
What's the
me.
caveat? Because you have a couple different names.
You can call
Stegsaurus.
me Stegsaurus, Stegnosaurus, Steg. They all work. Whatever works. Something that starts with Steg.
This is the unofficial official launch of our podcast together, and we don't have a title yet, but we just wanted to get on here and just kind of talk about Cyberpunk 2077. Mainly, I wanted to talk about it. And Steg here has not really heard about the game too much or like looked into the game yet. So I thought he would be a good person to throw my ideas off of. And just my opinions.
Yeah.
So basically, if you haven't been paying attention to the news regarding this game, the reviews have started to come out as of today, and the game comes out in 2.5-3 days at this point, on Wednesday night. And overall, really good stuff, but this is mostly from the major outlets that could get review copies. We all know how that is.
Sure.
However, some of the slightly smaller outlets and YouTubers that are able to kind of speak their opinion a little bit more, they have been talking about the fact that it's riddled with bugs. And even IGN also said that it's riddled with bugs. Nothing that's going to crash your game. It's still going to run on your computer, but there are some concerns. And I kind of just need to rant about gaming in 2020. And
Yeah,
like the fact
There's
that
lots to say.
we can't escape these unfinished games. It doesn't matter if you are an independently owned Polish game company that self-publishes. You still have to release the game at some point, and for some reason in 2020, every game comes out broken. So to kind of walk us through this, I have open a review mega thread on Reddit, so we can kind of scroll through some of the reviews and just go over them. And I want to get your opinion on them, Steg.
Is this something you can share to me on Discord here?
Oh yes, I will send you the link. One second here.
Cool.
There you go.
Let's see what we got going on here.
So, I haven't checked Metacritic at all day, but as of right now, and let me share this to the viewers. Right there. I think that should work. Yep. Okay, so Open Critic, which is a site I actually don't know anything about.
I've never heard of Open Critic.
I think it's similar to Metacritic, like it aggregates scores.
Anyone can submit. Maybe it's not. You don't have to be like a top tier publisher or top tier website.
So it's 97% critic recommended. It's getting lots of 9s and 10s if we scroll through the review mega thread on Reddit. However, there's a lot of it isn't perfect and jarring bugs. And bugs, aren't the end of the world, but when you've been waiting 7 years for a game, it's kind of disappointing to see that after like 3 delays, 1 last year and 2 this year, that they still haven't gotten it under control. And like it almost makes you wonder what it was like a year ago. Like what was the state of the game a year ago if it's still this buggy? Things like frame rate drops when you're driving, props that don't appear or are invisible or like get stuck. It's like a character will be trying to show you something. This is just from like some of the audio reviews that I've heard. This is just kind of anecdotal evidence, I guess, at this point.
And is it the kind of thing to where like because I remember from playing like Fallout, you would have those scenarios where like you can't continue with a mission because you're waiting on someone to give you an item or whatever, and it just glitches and they don't actually give it to you, so you have to run away and come back or whatever to get them to actually do what they're supposed to.
Yeah,
that kind of
so
stuff.
there was a couple points where they did have to reset the game or reset the mission to get it to progress. So there are unfortunately some of those. But it's funny you make that connection to Fallout because that's immediately everyone's next favorite open world game that's riddled with bugs that people like
Yeah.
to kind of bring up in situations like this. Uh it's how much jankiness are you willing to tolerate in the name of open world gaming? I mean, part of me would say if we're spending $60 to $70 on it, we would not tolerate any of it. But how much do you think you would be willing to tolerate?
Yeah, that's a good question because I've thought about like I remember playing Fallout 3 with my one friend growing up, and it was the first time I was exposed to something quite that vast. And some of the glitches are funny to where you shoot a car and when it blows up, it goes like a million miles into the sky, kind of thing. But if it's like a weird thing here or there, and it's almost like a funny bug, it doesn't really bother me. But when it's the kind of thing where like you're constantly saving every 5 minutes in a mission because you're worried that the mission's going to like lock you out because of a bug, that's really frustrating. So when it gets to that point where you like don't trust the game, I think that's the cutoff point where it's like this needs to be better polished,
So
in my opinion.
from what I'm hearing and reading, it's not quite at that level yet. Like, there's a couple instances where they had to kind of like they were soft locked, I guess. So they had to reset the mission, but it's mostly visual bugs. But you would think that it's still pretty jarring in an RPG that's all about getting lost in a fantasy world, you know?
Yeah.
So that's definitely a downside that I'm not very happy about hearing about. But what I think is more concerning is the console versions. So all of these reviews are on PC,
Oh, that makes
which
a
is
big difference. Yeah.
what I'm playing on when I get the game. Fortunately, GOG and Steam have return policies, so if it literally doesn't work on my system for some reason, I'm safe. If I'm so frustrated with bugs, I'm safe. I can get a refund. But I'm really worried about console gamers right now because besides like the 7-minute Xbox and PS4 gameplay trailers that they've put out, which are very rehearsed, you know how that
Yeah,
is.
right. Yeah, they're
Um,
not going to do anything that makes it slow down.
yeah, that we haven't been able to see very much console footage, and they've told the reviewers right now that they're not allowed to show gameplay yet. So I think this is the main thing about this situation and launch that bothers me. It's like they know that it's still buggy, which on some level, like we're willing to forgive that. But the fact that they're purposely hiding it until the last minute is what kind of seems a little underhanded and shady to me. Because these reviewers keep saying they have footage of these bugs that they want to be able to share. Specifically, Skill Up, who is a YouTube reviewer that I really like. He says, and I have his tweet pulled up here on stream. I have finished Cyberpunk, but I will not have a review up today as I could not comply with CDPR's embargo requirement that prohibited us from using our own recorded gameplay in the review. Instead, we were told to use B-roll, which is basically trailer footage.
Yeah, I think I saw this tweet earlier. I don't know if you sent it to me or I saw someone like it, but
I may have retweeted it, I think. Reviews should not be vehicles for rolling out more marketing material, so I'll put my review up when I'm able to show you the reality of the game with my own footage. I'm also disappointed that no console review code was provided to any outlet. Console games are often reviewed without their day 1 or even day 0 patches, so Cyberpunk would not have been special in this regard. It's really lame that no reviewer can tell you how this game runs on console in the review embargo. I absolutely love this game, and I think CDPR did extraordinary work, but it's clearly unfinished at this point, and no review relying on trailer footage alone can properly convey that. And I think that's pretty, what's the word? I respect him a lot for saying that,
yeah.
because I agree 100%. And that brings up another point, which reminded me to talk about the patch, because although we'll see lots of talk about the patch when we get to the Reddit comments, but basically, I feel like it's a little underhanded that they're not allowing anyone to show off these bugs yet. You know, like when people might still, the console gamers might have a chance to cancel their pre-order 3 days before it comes out. But I mean, thank God I don't only own my OG PS4. I still have a launch PS4. It can barely turn on anymore. For all the other little Timmies out there that are looking forward to playing this game on their launch PS4, I mean, what's their experience going to be? We don't really know.
Yeah, if it's that bad on PC. Yeah, it's frustrating because with all this stuff, like you're saying, seeing these problems and this feels very like 10 years ago where it was up to magazines and websites to talk about a game and all that stuff with them not wanting to talk about problems, obviously, with the money and everything. But nowadays, when someone wants to see a game and they're on Twitch looking at it, that like this feels very old school
Mm,
compared to that, where you can just load up on Twitch and watch 100 different people playing a game. This
right.
feels really backwards. It's like it just feels very shady. I mean, if you're reviewing a phone and there's a giant problem to where if you do X, Y, and Z in a row, the phone shuts off and you can't turn it back on, and then you write your review, but then the manufacturer told you don't talk about that. Like that's a pretty big problem. Like the phone's great, except for this problem that I can't tell you about, and I
Right.
can't tell you about it until after you've already bought it. I mean, it kind of ruins the point of a review.
And we've, as the gaming community, we've wrestled with the idea of pre-orders for a really long time.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people had goodwill for CD Projekt Red after like The Witcher 3 being pretty good. Or as many people will say, very good. I personally didn't care for it just because it was like kind of complicated to me. um, and I couldn't really get stuck into the world not playing the other games. But you could tell that like just from playing an hour of The Witcher 3, you could tell that this company knows how to make an RPG. So I respect them for that. Um, but apparently The Witcher 3 had a lot of bugs, and so they're like, it'll get fixed over time. Just like Call of Duty will get fixed over time. And the Avengers will get fixed over time. It's like in 2020, can we stop being okay with this?
Yeah, it makes you appreciate so much more like a small indie release that just does what it sets out to do, or the rare like side AAA game. Like I think about games like Child of Light. I mean, that game came out forever ago now, but like Ubisoft made that game, and I can't believe that sometimes that like they made such a like non like mainstream something that wouldn't appeal to the mainstream very much, and it was like a great game at launch. Like I feel like that doesn't really happen too much anymore, and I think that I mean, yeah, day one patches are great because they can fix problems before we see the game. But at the same time, you're right. Like it's just when this has become the norm. Is it ever going to end? Like,
Yeah. And like you and I guess my point is it ever going to end? We really thought that CG Project Red, the champion of the player, was going to be the one to do it, but apparently not.
and that's why when everyone, this is a side thing, but when everyone asked me if I was excited for this game, I told them that I'm kind of neutral on it, half because I've never played any of the studio's games, and half for this reason. Not because I thought that this game specifically was going to have a problem. I just think history tells me that whenever everyone is excited for something, it's probably going to have some problems at launch. Like, I
Mm,
just feel like no game can live up to the hype. And I know that, like, CDPR or Valve, like, those are trusted studios that most of the time live up to the hype, but it's really hard for any company to do that all the time. And especially with a launch as big as this, with the year it's been and all the problems that the development problems this game's already gone through. So I was cautious about it. I mean, I don't want to see it fail, obviously, but
yeah, me neither. I still have some excitement. Like I never was crazy overly hyped downing hundreds of articles and speculative YouTube videos a day on it. And as we'll get, the Reddit community for this game is ridiculous because of how much Reddit circle jerks The
yeah,
Witcher.
it's super excited about
um,
it.
but yeah, I'm still excited for it. Like I personally just really like the cyberpunk kind of like genre um, of sci-fi. Not necessarily like I didn't really know anything about this tabletop game. Like in case you didn't know, it's based off of an 80s tabletop game, Cyberpunk 2020.
I think I
Um,
heard vaguely that was a
yeah,
thing, but yeah.
so it's based off of that. and so I've like kind of read into that lore a little bit since I have gotten excited for this game. But just as a fan of like the genre, I'm still excited to explore the world, because let's talk about some good things. The reviews all say great things about the main storyline. It's shorter than we expected. It's like 20 hours, which is still pretty darn good. The main story is like 20 hours. It's pretty darn good. There's tons of side quests. I watched the IGN review earlier, and they said that they beat the main quest line in like 20 hours without really doing much side stuff. So they reverted a save, did another 20 hours worth of side quests, and then replayed the final mission, and there were like 6 different alternative endings that they could have taken because of the way side quests like affected the main story.
That's cool. I like that. I like that kind of thing. I like that. I like when that has an impact. Like it just feels like what you're doing is actually making a difference, and it feels like with the side quests that you choose and how you choose to do them actually change the world instead of just being like a checklist to check off. So that's cool to hear.
That was one of my that was one of my favorite things about Fallout New Vegas, which was like there was so many different factions you could follow that changed the way that the ending played out. So I'm excited about that still.
Yeah, scanning through these reviews, most of the negatives seem to focus on the bugs, but it seems like there's a lot of good stuff here. I mean, they talk about that there's a lot of freedom and there's a ton of stuff to do, and there's a good balance of like stealth and RPG elements. Like most of the ones that are below like an 8 out of 10 are either like very short. Like it's fine to make a game like that. For many, that's the promise of Cyberpunk. It just wasn't that promise to me. Like I don't know what that means.
It's kind of
I mean,
vague.
it's just a snippet, obviously, but
yeah. Another thing. So I watched Giant Bomb is another like kind of game, I guess coverage place that I really like. Jeff Gersman specifically talked about it. They didn't put out a written review from what I can find, but they did a little live stream earlier today that I rewatched just to hear their impressions, because it's not ready for review yet because they haven't beaten it. But he said that it almost feels like some of the more edgy marketing stuff that they kind of threw around is just like window dressing. It almost feels like, what's the word?
like being provocative for the sake of getting people interested.
Exactly. It's overly provocative for the sake of getting people interested. Like there's so much swearing, so much like sex, and like it's like you can appreciate it to an extent because it is a dark future in a pretty effed up world. But like he said that it wasn't really implemented the way he would have liked to see it. That was just another negative I wanted to bring up because I trust their opinion. So there are a couple negatives that some places are talking about, but then you scroll down a little bit farther and you hear by press start Brody Gibbons, Night City along with all of it offers and all that call it home makes for an intoxicating escape. Here's hoping the next 100 hours are as utterly compelling. Staggering, overwhelming, surprising in its spectacle. Grim setting, mix of gameplay systems land. Sprawling, dense, clever, witty. So like they say it's clever and witty, whereas Jeff Gersman said he was rolling his eyes at some of the dialogue being like pedantic, I guess.
Yeah, it really depends on what you're looking for, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
I really go back, just personally, I really go back and forth on like how much a story matters to me in a game. Like I can play a game like Doom, the new Doom games where it's like, okay, shoot some demons and have fun, where I don't really care what the story is. But then there's other games like I think about like Fallout 4 or something, since we're talking about RPGs, and that's with the main story. That's kind of like, okay, at the beginning they took your son, and that's like, okay, go play hundreds of hours of this game, and then at the end there's the end of the story. It just feels like there's a beginning and an end. It's just like, oh, like this middle is just this like nebulous open, like nothing you do really matters until you get to the end of the game. I really feel like, I don't know if I think I've mentioned this to you recently, like I want to go back to Zelda Breath of the Wild soon, because I played like a quarter of it when I first played it when it came out, and I want to go back and like continue to explore it because that game, in terms of open worlds, is still one of the best I've played. For the sole reason is I turned the map mini map off, which I don't usually do in a game because I find it too just annoying to constantly pull your map up. Because in that game, what I would do is I would go somewhere and I would say, okay, I'm going to go do this quest or I'm going to go to this town or explore this area or whatever. And then without fail, all the time on your way there, you see something. There's a mountain off in the distance that looks weird, or you see some kind of pattern of rocks that's different. There's always something that's grabbing your attention, and it feels like natural exploration. And when I play most other open world games, I don't really get that. So if this game can deliver that kind of thing, it would make me much more interested in it. Like I played Shadow of Mordor recently and I liked the game, but it was still a lot of like, okay, I need to go to this icon on the map and do this. Like the world didn't really feel like it was lending fun to the game. The most of the fun was just the combat.
There's supposedly still a lot of that, or I should say there supposedly is a lot of that, but it's still, like Giant Bomb said, it still feels very gamey. Like there's a lot of stuff to get caught up in, but like some of the NPCs are kind of shallow, but other ones are really deep. So, it's not perfect in that sense, but there definitely is a lot of that from what I'm understanding. But again,
yeah.
It stinks we haven't seen real gameplay yet, like raw gameplay, because that would really let you see how expansive the world is. Like, okay, after the 3-hour tutorial or whatever, or intro, like how much can we actually do?
How minute to minute gameplay is it a lot of like, this is grabbing my attention and then I'm changing. Like, I like in a game like when you get like that to where you're like, there's so much you want to do that you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I go, oh no, and then I got to add this to my like it's fun when it's like that much excitement of like new things to do and that like moment to moment gameplay, and you're like, without seeing it, you're right, it's when it's all canned, you don't see any of that.
Right. Okay, so let's move on. That's our impressions of the reviews. Let's read Reddit's impression of the reviews. And I went ahead and did us all the favor of sorting by controversial here, because I think there's just some really tone deaf circle jerking going on. Like
this is on the comments on that page you sent.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you sort by controversial, this first one I think is probably the most. I don't know whether to upvote it or downvote it. Let me read it out. So, people who care about bugs, even though they're attached, okay, I have to kind of add. Do you want to?
Yeah, sure. So people who care about bugs, even though they are patchable, 7 out of 10. People who look past that shit and score the game for what it is, 10 out of 10. There you go. While I'm somewhat being a turd here, I think the video game review system needs to be amended.
Right. So he's saying that people who give it a higher score, or people who give it a lower score because of the bugs, are wrong, when other people still gave it a 10 out of 10 because of bugs. Like, I guess this comes back to our discussion of how much are you willing to overlook. Like, some people are willing to overlook bugs, but I mean, that doesn't make this person who's not willing to overlook the bugs of a 7-year delayed game, it doesn't make them wrong for giving it a 7.
Yeah, and the guy below it says bugs and glitches are patchable, but the world building, but bad world building and storytelling stays forever. And I agree. Mm-hmm. And this is why it almost seems like, and I don't think this would ever happen in today's gaming journal, press world, is that like so many games are different the day or the week they come out, and 6 months down the line. Like all this stuff we're talking about right now, if that's all patched up 6 months down the line, this could be the greatest RPG ever made, and it could be an easy recommendation, but not right now.
Yeah.
If you don't have to worry about falling through the floor and NPCs getting glitched and all that. But
exactly.
How do you, without amending your entire review, how does someone clicking on IGN's review that they wrote today in May, how do you convey that without re-reviewing the entire game every time there's a patch?
Yeah. Especially in a single player game where it's not expected to have to do that, like a seasonal, like live service game.
Right, because I remember when games like Overwatch started becoming the norm, to where it was like one multiplayer game for a long time instead of the yearly one. I would see sites do a yearly review, and they would talk about the new characters that have been introduced since last year and the big changes, and like that makes sense. But trying to do it for a game like this, especially where someone has to sit and spend 50 plus hours just to have enough experience to write a review, that's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of time.
Live viewer Satanist, love that name. SAN1ST. He brings up the example of No Man's Sky. The game is so different, it requires a full review. They even redid the mechanics, which is definitely true. No Man's
Right.
Sky is kind of touted as a game that has surpassed even its like original promises, and its low scores at the beginning. It is a completely different game now, and it still has a thriving community because of the way that they've treated it.
But if you read a review from when it came out, or even 6 months later, or watched an old
Yeah.
YouTube video, you'd have no idea. And so that's probably a case like this. When a game came out, if I was a professional reviewer, I probably would have said it's not worth it for all these reasons that we know about. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it's yeah. I guess it's I feel like in these kind of reviews, you can't write a caveat for everyone, where you can't say like if bugs don't bother you that much, or if this doesn't bother you, or if I mean load times, stuff like in like the Crash Bandicoot Insane trilogy for one example, like when that game came out, the load times were pretty slow, and then they patched them. But like you can mention that, but would you say I don't recommend the game because of it? Like
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's like you said, you have to make the recommendation for today. So like you have the fanboys in the comments saying, "Well, it'll get fixed, it'll get fixed." Yeah, but that's not what the review is. The review is the day one experience. And
Yeah, if you buy
actually,
this game today, will you have fun? Is it worth your however much money it is?
well, this gets into another confusing topic about this game, which I guess we'll just jump right into because that's a good kind of segue. Is CDPR has already said there's going to be a day one patch that fixes a lot of bugs that are present in the current build. However, they weren't clear to the reviewers if they were playing with that patch or not. So I looked on a
No.
couple different sources, and apparently when they got the review copies, there was no patch. So it's probably like the gold version of the game from like a month ago. Um, but then some of the reviewers said that they got a patch about halfway through their playtime, which CDPR is calling the day zero patch, not the day one patch. So, but then Skill Up, I think let me see if I can find his tweet. I want to say no,
It
he
would
didn't.
it wouldn't be
But
a bad idea for comparison's sake if the reviewers played partly with the gold version and partly with the patch version. I mean, that's wasting their time with bugs that won't affect people playing it. But at least then
yeah,
they know. But that goes back to what we were saying with transparency. I mean, you have all these problems, and you can't even bother telling the reviewers if they're playing the live version of the game that millions of people are going to be playing, or an old build that doesn't even it's not even relevant really.
yeah. Yep, that's exactly right. There's a few. I think I skimmed through these comments earlier, and there's a few that talk about the day one patch. Yeah, like here, this guy says PC Gamer and GameSpot had the day one patch. This guy replies, "No, they didn't. We received a 50 gigabyte patch during our review period. They probably already formed their impressions with the unpatched version." So these guys are kind of defending the game, like, oh, they already received a patch, and we're getting another day one patch. So hopefully it'll be better. And yes, that's true. Hopefully it will be better on launch day. But again, goes back to the topic of they need to review what they played so you can decide if you should spend your money on it. And it's
Right, and
still up
it's
in the
hard to
air.
it's hard to review like a promise. Like this game's
Yeah.
good, but it has a promise. Like in that case, you could review the game 6 months ago. It sounds
Hmm.
really cool. You should get it. Like that's as good as it's buggy right now, but you should get it because it might not be buggy in 6 months. Like
Yeah. And I just want to clarify, if you're just joining the stream or podcast, we're not hating on this game like super hardcore, even though we are bringing up the negatives. I I'm kind of ranting about the state of gaming in 2020 in general, because it feels like we're going through this same thing with every AAA game these days. It's like every AAA game has a day one patch. We don't know what's in the day one patch until it comes out. Call of Duty isn't going to be feature complete until season one comes out. it still has 8 maps. It's going to have 12 whenever season 1 comes out, and season 1 just got delayed. It's like we're constantly guessing on when we're going to get what we paid for. And so just the fact that CDPR is having this issue is just really disheartening to me, I guess.
Yeah, I am getting tired of the, like, you're buying a beta version and it's going to get better later on. I mean, a lot of online games like that are going to get better over time, obviously. But I mean, I don't think to be a little more positive, I don't think they've all been losers this year. I mean, I haven't played every big game of 2020, but I mean, I got Spider-Man Miles Morales at launch on PS5 and it was fine. I had a couple like freezing issues, but that might have just been down to the PS5. So that was good, and I thought that game was complete and fun to play on its own. Without later on, there'll be more stuff, but
you can give a little bit of an excuse for new hardware.
Yeah,
sure.
Right. But I mean, even I was going to say now we're talking about this, Spider-Man was good, but I also I picked up Sackboy: A Big Adventure on PS5 at launch, and that game's good. Single player game. It has multiplayer, local multiplayer, kind of like Super Mario 3D World, to where you can play with up to 4 people on a level just for fun. But then there's a couple levels where you have to have at least 2 people to play them. And in the hints in the loading screens, it says if you don't have friends to play with locally, use the play online button in the pause menu to find people online. Well, that's not in the game at launch. So there's trophy. I mean, I don't really care about it now, but there's trophies and whole levels that you can't play in the game unless you have at least 2 people, which means having someone with you, which not everyone does now because of the pandemic, and you need 2 controllers. So if you care about the platinum or you just want to try all those, like, you can't play all the levels in the game because there's no online play and you need a second controller. Like, that's a pain.
I agree. That's another great example of, and that's a modern game as well. A couple more posts in the chat here I'll read before we move to the next comment in the thread. Flamer Gamer, aka Trevin in the Discord, shout out to Trevin, says the only thing I hate it is lag in every game. Well, Trevin,
hopefully that won't be a problem in a single player game here.
Yeah, hopefully in a single player game that won't be a problem, but it depends what you define lag as, I guess. Is it internet lag due to your internet connection? Is it frame rate dropping because of your PC? There's a lot that goes into it. And then Satanist, it's the rock in a hard place of dealing with literally anything that is pre-launch. You can only review what you were given. Though a company may say they'll fix it, there's never a promise that they will, and even if they do more work on it, they might not ever fix the exact issue you had. It's exactly right. And we're just kind of okay with that in the age of getting updates. I mean, but then again, you could say that it was even worse 20 years ago because Spyro 3 never got a patch, or Spyro 2 never got a patch. They just released Spyro 3 the next year. Like,
yeah, but I think, well, there's 2 different things here with what Seamus or Satanist is saying. Sorry. Thanks for joining in, by the way. So like, I was thinking about this. Think about a non tech example, right? Like, say you hired someone to like fix something with your plumbing or whatever, and they did a crap job to where they didn't fully fix the problem, and so you still had a headache, right? So if you were reviewing it at that time, you would say, I paid them all this money to fix this leak, and they didn't fix it, so you'd be ticked off, right? Now, if you waited to review until you called them and said, hey, there's a problem, and then they fixed it, they were super nice about it, they apologized because the guy was new, blah, 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 that would change your opinion of it. But it depends on when you're having to review it, right? Like, you might say, they were annoying at first, but they fixed my problem and were great about it, so I would use them again. Or they tried to fix this and they broke it worse, I'm never going to use it. Like, that's one example. And then with Spyro, I don't know, with the older stuff, I think,
just threw that out as an example. This is in your wheelhouse. Satanist just brought up DK64. I don't know. Do you have the chat pulled up?
Yeah, I do know that's they included the expansion pack for the N64 in the box with DK64 because they couldn't fix the problem like before launch. So they just said, here, we'll just give you the expansion pack because that fixed it.
What's the expansion pack? Is that an expansion pack as in like a new level, or is that?
No, so the N64 physically on the front of the console had a little slot for like memory expansion. It was like an extra 4 megabytes of memory or something. I forget exactly what it was, but it was for DK64. A few games required it. Like, you needed it for DK64. you needed it for Majora's Mask, and then certain games like Perfect Dark, you had to have it for like the campaign, but you could play like some local multiplayer without it. So only a few only a few N64 games required it. It was just more memory for the system.
That's really interesting. I never knew
Yeah.
about that. A couple more people popping up. Thanks for listening, guys. DeCrafta. Also, games like GTA 5 that have been out for years and huge problems still haven't been fixed, such as incredibly long load times. Yeah, jeez. Oh my gosh. Do you remember trying to play GTA Online on the Xbox 360? Oh my
Wow.
gosh. I wanted to die. Oh. Majora's Mask 2 says, "Hello, Hugh. Welcome, welcome."
What's up, Tony?
That Majora's Mask, again, that's your wheelhouse.
Yeah, that was. I'm looking over this again. Yeah, so it was 4 MB. So the system had 4 megs of RAM, and that doubled it to 8. It was required for DK64 and Majora's Mask, and Perfect Dark needed it for almost everything. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's easy to look back with rose-tinted glasses and say like they, not that they cared more back then, but like when they released an N64 or PS1 game, I think without the expectation of patches, if you released a buggy mess, magazines were going to say this doesn't work, it's broken, and it wouldn't be a classic because it would be more of like a crock or something, like a game that people don't look back on as fondly because it wasn't as polished. Like it mattered more back then because there was no update.
Yeah, and geez, Croc. That just completely threw me for a loop there. Croc, Legend of the Gobos or whatever.
I had Croc on Game Boy Color. I never played any of the console ones, but I mean, Croc might have been fine. I just mean it would have been like one of those games where it wasn't a treasured classic that we look back on for whatever reason.
Satanist brings up the example of people updating their Amazon reviews. If they get like a broken unit at first, it's a 1-star. People do it with App Store reviews too. If it gets updated, that there are user scores are updatable, but a user score doesn't have as much reach as an IGN article on day one.
Yeah, I think this is a lot of these problems are a step back from what we're talking about of just like game issues, like because with what we're saying with the critic score, a user can update their score, but when a critic doesn't, and that launch window with the critic reviews is so critical because they need the Metacritic score to put on the back of the box. They need the quotes from all the magazines and set websites to put on the commercials they play during the Super Bowl, all that stuff. And that's like a huge thing. Like, yeah, the game might get fixed 6 months down the line and they update their reviews, but the hype, the general like TV, YouTube,
it's all marketing.
Hype is all gone.
And that's again, we're going back to that point before. That's the whole point of probably the whole point of not giving out console copies is it wouldn't help the marketing.
Yeah, and I wonder too. I was going to say this when we were talking about, you were saying about like the launch model PS4. I do wonder how it'll be with this like split console generation right now. Like I wasn't planning on getting this game at launch. I don't think I will, but if it was on PS5, I would consider it. Like now that I have a PS5, obviously I'm not going to buy it on PS4.
Yeah.
But I am curious. I mean, if this game day one is like it sucks on Xbox One and PS4, you have to get it on PC to enjoy it. Like that's a big caveat too, because a lot of people aren't going to have a powerful enough PC to run the game smoothly. So they have to wait to get a next gen system and then get the game in April whenever it comes out.
There isn't much to talk about as far as the next gen upgrade is. They've said it's going to be free, but there's no date on it. I think they're aiming for 2021, but there's no date attached to it. So as of right now, it just has like the boost mode, higher frame rate, I guess, that the PS5 automatically does. No word on that, but yeah, maybe it's worth waiting for. Probably, if you're not hyped, it's definitely worth waiting.
Oh yeah. I have so much else to play that it's not.
Let me go to another goofy comment here. Where was it? Oh, so I didn't actually read the GameSpot review, but people were picking on the reviewer already. Just in case anyone is wondering why GameSpot gave it a 7 out of 10, you can go back and look at some of Kaylee Plague's reviews and see that she doesn't really like video games that much. Her idea of hard-hitting reviews in games journalism is to be as contrarian and harsh as possible for the sake of standing out. Don't let it panic you into thinking the game isn't very good, hence why every other place is giving it 9s and 10s. As an example, Plague gave Pokemon Sword and Shield, two of the most underwhelming cookie-cutter feature-light shovelware Pokemon games in recent memory, a 9 out of 10. She's not the target audience for Cyberpunk 2077. Like, that's the whole point of a review. It's personal preference.
Yeah, I don't think that has any. I mean, I remember people doing the same thing when Breath of the Wild came out, and Jim Sterling was the only person to give it like a non-perfect score, and they freaked out.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's your preference. I mean, I think if you had a history of just being a contrarian for contrarian's sake, that's one thing. But I mean, it can be. I mean, I've never worked for like a big game site, but I mean, I'm sure that you might not always get the genre that you love to review. I mean, maybe you're more of a casual player, and so you don't appreciate like a game with as many options and things like that. I mean, that's not really something to go after that makes any sense. I don't think.
This is another controversial one, but I think this is actually a level-headed one. Some of the reviews say the world is superficial. Cheap utilization of the cyberpunk genre and reducing its meaning to only surface-level aesthetics. That I haven't read it. The only person I heard say that is Jeff Gersman, who I like, but he's known to have different opinions than a lot of other people. I find it hard to believe that they're subverting the cyberpunk genre when they literally have one of the creators of it, Mike Pondsmith, who made the board game. He's like been working with them every step of the way to make sure that the world feels right. So I almost doubt these two things being issues. But there are a couple reviews that mention it, so we'll give them credit. Twitter account of a game that is meant to criticize corporate oppression getting cute with a union-busting imperialist billionaire. They're talking about the Twitter account for this game is always tweeting at Elon Musk.
Oh,
and like it's kind of funny. I think it's funny that I mean, if anyone is going to rule the world with a mega corporation, it might be Elon Musk.
So it's just like you think it's like tone deaf based on the angle of the game,
right? And that to kind of piggyback off of that, and I don't want to get into this too much, but the trans community is a little upset as well because in the marketing materials they've said that you can pick a it's not male female, it's masculine feminine, but they touted like you can pick the genitals no matter what, and you can change their size and like all this stuff in the character creator. But their issue is like they're touting it in the marketing materials, but it doesn't really play that big of a part in the game itself. And all of the transgender people in the game are mainly just sexualized. There was a marketing so a lot of this is brought up in I know you'll laugh because you have words about Polygon, but Polygon's like preview talks about this, and I actually do think it's worth a read. I don't think it's that like it's I think it's worth a read. I think they have some good points in there because like and again I don't want to get into the topic of this too much, but I think that with their marketing, they are kind of like trying to sell this game as things it isn't, and almost like virtue signaling with the fact that you can customize your genitals, but then all of the actual trans people in the game are sexualized with giant genitals. And the other concern they had was like the voice. You can't pick the voice. So if you pick masculine V, you get male voice V. If you pick feminine V, you get female voice V, which is not really the reality of most trans people, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
So it's like, again, that's a whole nother side conversation of the nuances of that topic. But I just wanted to bring that up because that was making the rounds on Twitter yesterday, and I think it is worth mentioning because, again, they're using it as a marketing thing. I don't
it seems
really
like they're like, look at this feature we have that's going to be great for this audience, and
inclusive. Yeah.
it's very like surface level, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
exactly.
Yeah,
And I don't really care if the Twitter account is getting cutesy with Elon Musk. I think it's actually kind of funny, but the other aspect, the inclusivity aspect of it is a little off. Let's keep reading. Their refusal to show PS4, Xbox One gameplay, the footage embargo for reviewers. We already talked about all this. Possibly Assassin's Creed Unity levels.
I don't think a company would ever let that happen after how much of a laughingstock that game was. I mean, I don't think that would happen to be that bad.
What was the deal with Assassin's Creed Unity?
I never played it. It was just a laughingstock at launch, like
Oh,
horrible, like falling through the full floor. That you can look up pictures. Like if you use Google, honestly, if you Google it, probably the first one is that famous. It's like an NPC where their face is missing, so it's just floating eyes and like the back of their hair.
oh, you know what? I do remember this.
That's pretty famous. Yeah.
Oh, here's one. Next gen hair rendering.
Um, I just looked up AC Unity bugs, and there's a ton of.
Oh, that one. Oh, that's
Yeah,
terrifying.
that's the thing. That one, yeah. So that, I mean, it was stuff like that, and falling through the floor, and missions freezing, and just like that type of thing. Where I'm talking about, where it's so bad that you feel like you can't play the game because it's just broken.
Someone. Oh, you know what? I lost the controversial ones that were defending the game. A lot of these controversial ones are now defending the reviews. Overhyped
But
game turns out to be just good, and I'm fine with that. But anyone with common sense knew this wasn't going to be GTA 5 Red Dead Redemption 2 level release.
I think that's an interesting comment. Well, okay, I've played like 15 minutes of GTA 5. I didn't play it on the original systems. I played a little bit on PS4, so I wasn't there for the launch of that. But I mean, from what I have seen and heard, that game pretty much lived up to the hype. I mean, it was super hyped
Yeah.
and it was that good at launch. But I feel like Red Dead 2, from the bit that I've heard, like on Nakey Jakey's video, I think that in a lot of ways people were not disappointed by it, but it wasn't the amazing perfection that a lot of people thought it was going to be. Like it had a lot of really great deep elements, but it had a lot that felt like a step backwards too.
Yeah. I think with GTA 5, you also got to remember that game only launched with single player. GTA Online didn't come out for several months, if I remember correctly. So the single player was like great. I don't think there was really any problems with the game besides long load times.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, the single player. I thought the multiplayer was an afterthought in terms of it wasn't the priority at launch.
The lefties on Twitter don't like this game, apparently. So that means this game is probably going to be awesome.
I mean, I think both. Yeah, Tony's right. I was thinking about that, seeing the memes of like the new GTA game on each system, and it was like GTA 5, 5.1,
Mm-hmm.
5.2. It's hard to believe that game launched on Xbox 360. I remember hearing when it was going to relaunch on PS4 and Xbox One, and it was going to have the first person mode, and that was forever ago now.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That game was fun with first person. This one just confuses me. I saw this one earlier. So a whole lot of nothing. Great. That's helpful. So glad for these reviews.
I think he's saying like nothing is in the reviews, don't really have anything specific to say.
Yeah, and I think that's probably because of the fact that they can't show footage, I'd assume.
Yeah, that's real. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's that classic argument where if you don't really have anything to hide, why would you do that? We talked about it before, but that's frustrating.
So basically, if you ignore the bugs, it's a 10. I don't know about that. I mean, yes and no. Again, how many bugs can you ignore?
Yeah, but that doesn't
Know.
even if there were no bugs, you could still criticize certain elements of a story or the world or whatever, like we were saying.
Lots of arguing about incels. Let's see.
Into the controversial. So
there was a really good one that I saw. I think it was the first one we discussed, so I don't think we missed anything. I don't know. There's leaked gameplay out there. If you want to see the bugs, you can find it. I don't really want to see it. um, maybe we'll revisit this in a week or two and see where we're at. I think that's really all I wanted to discuss about Cyberpunk. What are your final thoughts?
So we were talking about one other thought I kind of had spinning off of earlier when we were talking about like the problems with the AAA hype and the journalism tie-in and all that. Like, it's frustrating. I feel like this is just kind of a problem that won't really go away unless we like change so many things about how this works. Like, there's a game announced and so many people get hyped for it, and they decide before it comes out it's going to be amazing. And then you have stuff like this where there's crunch time and so there's bugs, or a reviewer doesn't like it for whatever reason, and then everyone, not everyone, but a dedicated fan base freaks out because the game they haven't played yet was given less than a perfect score by some reviewer. I feel like it's so like that compared to a lot of the world of like some indie games that have come out recently. I feel like it's just such a less toxic, for lack of a better term, environment to where like there's so many cool indie games where like it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like Hades, I haven't played it, but I never heard about it, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of YouTubers and people on Twitter are talking about Hades, and it's like, oh, this sounds pretty cool. I like discovering a game like that after the fact. People talk about it, and then you don't have all those problems with company or websites can't update their reviews down the line. You can read Steam reviews that are current, or someone recommends it on a YouTube video or whatever, and it feels so much more fresh. And you like, oh yeah, this game's super cool. And if there are bugs, it won't get recommended. And when they get fixed, 6 months down the line or whatever, then the reviews will change, and it might be worth playing. It's just like the reverse. Like when the hype comes after the game, and then you hear about it, and like, oh, that sounds cool, I'll get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much better, I think, than all the hype beforehand. It just leads to heartbreak when it launches. For that's kind of a dumb term, but
I think we briefly mentioned that before we went live. Like, imagine if Half-Life Alyx got announced with a teaser trailer. I mean, Half-Life's a different animal because of all of the issues regarding that game's development, but Half-Life Alyx got announced in November of last year, and it released in March of this year. So like a 4-month waiting window. They showed gameplay right off the bat. Like, yeah, I don't know. The hype just got kind of out of control on this one, and that makes people toxic, like you said.
Yeah, and the longer time gives you more time to think about what you hope it'll be, or speculate based on what you don't see in trailers or whatever. And a shorter time. Saying this was just saying Nintendo gets to launch the same game every gen and get praised. In some ways, I agree. In some ways, I mean, there's the like new Super Mario Brothers, pretty similar every time, or most Pokemon games. But I think Nintendo's done some like oddball games you didn't see coming, that I enjoy more. But I mean, I love Nintendo, but I don't want to excuse them for the same thing. But we were just saying before though about like Hyrule Warriors. With Age of Calamity, it was the same thing. It was announced and released within 2 or 3 months, and same thing. You don't have the time to get all hyped up. But
I saw some people, I've been following the Cyberpunk subreddit for a while just because I like to keep up on the news on it. But like some people thought it was going to be like a Second Life Cyberpunk, like you were going to be able to. Like, just the theories people come up with that they're going to be able to do. Like, I'm going to be the CEO of one of these companies, and I'm going to have an apartment in this building, this building, this building. Like that. Like, these are serious comments. Like, it's still a video game, guys. It's still a video game.
Program that level of like it's a life simulator. Like that's insane. Like it's an RPG. It's not a game where you like walk around and like it's your real life.
Yep.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. I wasn't totally criticizing GTA launching. I mean, it's if more people can play it, great, and if they're tweaking it, that's cool too. And I haven't played GTA Online. I'm from what I understand, is that still actively being updated, or is it kind of coasting?
I think it is. I think it's still getting updates. That's really all I had to talk about Cyberpunk. What else have you been playing lately?
Been playing. So let's see. I got the PS5 a couple weeks ago, like I said. So finished
Mm.
Spider-Man, and then I played. What did I just finish? I'm totally drawing a blank right now. I've been playing Beat Saber, more on VR, partially for just exercise, and I feel like I'm getting a little bit better at it. Um, I think I want to play Resident Evil 3. I got that on sale. Oh, and I just played Shantae and the Seven Sirens, which was I like Shantae, but I almost feel like I it's a little not quite as good as I think it is. The
Mm.
last game, the earlier games were Metroidvanias, and the previous one before this, Half Genie Hero, was more like pick a level and play through it, action-y. This game is back to a Metroidvania with an interconnected world, but I felt really like paint by numbers, I guess. Like the world design was okay, but it was so easy.
Mm.
Like I don't mind when a game is easy and like chill, but this game was like it spit out food. Like enemies drop food constantly, which is a way to heal. So with most bosses, you can just sit next to them and spam attack because you can never die because you have so much food to heal with. Um, and like I don't like the flow of the game was pretty routine. Like you go to this, you go to a new area, you find a genie, you do this. Like it was kind of routine. So wasn't amazing, but I'm enjoying Sackboy. It's not perfect, but it's a fun like 3D linear platformer.
It's funny you bring up the difficulty spike or lack thereof whenever you are talking about health packs or like the food that drops.
Yeah.
Um, I was just playing Doom Eternal last night, trying to finish that before Cyberpunk comes out. And I think I'm playing on like there's like 5 difficulties. I think I'm on like the third or fourth one. Um, and I haven't like died hardly at all. So I had like 10 extra lives. And I made it to one room where there was a buff totem, which basically just makes enemies spawn endlessly. And I couldn't find where it was. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
I lost all 10 lives that I had saved up the entire game on one room. And I was just like so mad. I almost stopped playing, but then I found it after
I
I
wonder
nearly lost everything.
because there weren't too many of those buff totems, but
It was the end of the gore nest, the super gore nest level.
I have to look up a picture of it or something. But with that game, I played on ultra violence, which was one above. I think Hurt Me Plenty is the default difficulty, and I was sort of similar in the beginning. I didn't die too much, so I would have like 3 or 4 extra lives, and then I would end up dying on a particularly tough room. And then for the rest of the level, I didn't have any extra lives to use. That game was a good level of difficulty to where you had to be on your toes, but it wasn't like you make a mistake and you're going back 15 minutes. Like I hate that kind of difficulty. It was
Yeah.
just right to where you had to be. You couldn't get lazy, but it wasn't like so punishing that it wasn't fun.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised to see that the checkpoint was just right before the fight that I died in, which was
Right,
good.
like the lives are more of a convenience thing, so you don't have to restart the fight. Like they come in handy. I hate losing them at a bad moment when they'd be better used in a like a boss fight or something later
Hmm.
on.
Satanist is a fan of Beat Saber, apparently.
Excellent Beat Saber player.
I I have that with my Oculus on PC, and I couldn't imagine playing it without being able to mod in custom songs. Like I feel like that's the whole appeal of it to me.
I do want to do that, but I've been enjoying. I had like a second wave to where like when the first time I played it just on PSVR, like so there's no custom anything, but like I played through a bunch of like the included songs and I finished the whole like campaign mode, which is not super hard, but it has like different like modifiers to where it says, beat this song while only moving your arms this many meters or that kind of thing. So that's kind of fun. I like stuff like that. But I've been getting some of the packs and trying to get more so I can play on Expert Plus. And I feel like I'm like getting better is making me want to keep playing it because there's like more to grow to. I would like to play it on a PC headset, but I don't know. I just don't play VR enough to where I feel like it's worth getting right this minute, and it's fun enough on
Hmm.
PSVR for now. So
Jeez, started on Vive and upgrade to the index for better tracking on Expert Plus custom maps. Well, hey, I was impressed with the tracking on Oculus, and Steg here says that he's impressed with the tracking on PSVR. So I think they're just really good at optimizing the tracking.
yeah, I mean, I've never used a PC headset for, I don't, so I can't really compare it. But I mean, aside from The only issue I have on PlayStation is like if I tilt a save, if I tilt a controller like this, and the coloring is like behind my hand or whatever, it gets a little janky. But compared to other, I like rhythm games, and compared to other rhythm games where like the hardware can cause you to screw up. Like I love DDR, but I can never get like a full combo in a song, even if I'm good enough at it, because the pad, like I'm using a cheap foam pad. And so like you're gonna miss some steps here or there. But in Beat Saber, like I could get a good score and it doesn't feel like I'm missing a few blocks because the game's being stupid with the hardware. So it's works enough for me. I don't get frustrated at it for that reason.
I could do a whole nother podcast on obscure gaming cultures. Like, I love the fact that you still play DDR, like, and you love it, and you play it at home and not in an arcade. And it's like me, how like I watch Time Crisis arcade machine speed runs, and I'm like all about it. And like just these weird like arcade fandoms. I really think those are interesting.
I like really niche things like that. That's why I think I've sent you before some of Nick Robinson's videos on YouTube, and he does not necessarily like speed running, but he'll talk about like a game you've never heard of or like some specific aspect of some game. Like one of the things he talked about was there was this 3DS free to play game called Rusty's Real Deal Baseball. And the idea behind the game was that it was free to play, but it had some microtransactions, and you would haggle with this guy named Rusty in the game to get the price down for items. So the game meant for you to haggle. But what happened to him was he had a fire in his apartment that burned down a bunch of stuff. So he lost his save file. He lost his 3DS. So he got a new system, and when he re-downloaded the game, he had to play through it again, but he had already made the purchases for the game. So he decided to not haggle at all. He just said, I'll pay the full price. And there's a whole nother character in the game that no one ever knew about. When he made the video, it was called the Nintendo character with 0 Google results. And like when you Googled the character's name in quotes, like nothing was on the internet about it. So he like accidentally discovered this whole side to this game that was like never even known to exist. Like I think stuff like that is really interesting.
What is the name and what year is that? Like what?
Rusty's Real Deal Base. It was like 2013. It was an early 3DS game.
Oh,
it was when
okay.
I did a couple of those. Like there was that one, and there was what was the name of that game? Like 3DS crane game. I forget what it was called. It was like a free to play game where you would get prizes, and it would let you Nintendo Badge Arcade. That's what it was. That would let you like get themes for your home screen and stuff, and you got like a couple free plays, but then you could pay for more. I thought that was pretty clever. Yeah, Rusty's Real Deal Baseball came out in 2014 in the US.
I'm gonna have to watch that video.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have even said as much as I did, but he has a lot of videos that where he looks at like a specific element of something you've never heard of. It's really interesting.
Satanist, what was the final price for the bidding on those Time Crisis machines, if you don't mind me asking? Because I would love to have a Time Crisis 1 or 2 machine someday. Not in an apartment, but I get a sick gamer dungeon basement. That'd be pretty awesome to have an arcade machine. Oh my gosh, $4,500. Yeah, that's a lot.
2,500 Canadian is about 1950 US. Wow, that's a lot of money. I've always thought it'd be cool to have some arcade machines like that, like take the quarter thing out and just be able to have the original hardware, but it'd be a lot of money.
Nugget, thanks for the follow. I know who you are. Did you get locked out of your old Twitch account or something? Well, okay, yeah. So I'm glad that everybody, so many people stuck around for this kind of impromptu podcast. I'm down to keep chatting, but I just want to clarify that I don't think we're going to talk about Cyberpunk anymore. I think we kind of beat it to death in an hour. But this was the unofficial launch of our podcast that we haven't named yet, but plan on doing. So
that's a great name. Podcast we haven't planned yet.
Maybe we should just stick with that. So if you did enjoy this, please follow the stream or follow us on Twitter. I'm at Fixer_95. He's at Stegnersaurus in the title. And you'll follow us on there, or you could hop in the Discord, which is in the link below or right here. and we will post about it. Hopefully we could do one every week, but this is kind of just a test run to see what it's like doing a live podcast. Ben, what do you think about live podcasting? Do you like the chat interaction, or do you think it's distracting?
I like the chat interaction. It depends. I mean, we focused on Cyberpunk, and I think that we kind of branched off to a few things there, which was good. I like my favorite part of when I've streamed a couple of times is the chat. Like, I like that you can kind of get people's thoughts and kind of branch off to things as people bring it up. I like that part, so I'd be okay with that. I just get self-conscious about watching myself on the on this stream.
Oh, no problem. We'll work with that. The only concern I have is it's going to be like harder to put on podcast platforms, you know. It'll be good in video form, but not in like traditional podcast form.
True. It's like when you're doing it live, it's not as packageable to ship off to podcast distribution.
We'll have to think about that. Anime episode, that could be a sub goal or something.
I don't know. I haven't watched too much anime.
We'll have a guest star. I am the tree. He could be the anime expert.
Talk about the Danganronpa anime. That's about it.
Oof. Do you think that's obscure, or is it pretty popular?
I don't know. I heard about it through not a random mention, but there was a YouTube video about graphic design in games, and it was one of the games they mentioned out of several in that video. And the idea of the game, as they described it, sounded neat to me, so I ended up playing it. But I told a few people about it, and when I joined some Twitch and Discord communities online, a lot of people had played them, and I got a couple other people to play them. So I wouldn't say it's like super unknown, but it might not be like a household name, like something like Dragon Ball Z or something would be.
It feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's cool to introduce something.
I introduced a ton of my friends to both Minecraft and Persona, so I'm proud of myself for like getting more people to play 2 hits.
I have no idea how. I remember you telling me about Persona like when it was coming out, and I wasn't interested. I don't know if it was just like I was busy in life at the time or what. And you mentioned it to me again, and I finally decided to get it when it was on sale. Like, I don't know how I went from like, that doesn't sound like something I would enjoy at all, to I have to play this, and I ended up adoring it. Like, I don't know how that happened.
What's your favorite pop figure up there above you? Do you have any Persona ones?
I do, actually. I'm not turning away from my mic here. I have Joker, but he's still in the case. I get weird about a lot of my like stuff where I don't want to. It's not like I think it's going to be worth money or anything, but I like the stuff like from Persona. I really want to keep nice, I guess.
Satanist got a ton of friends in RuneScape after the beta ended, and League of Legends after its beta ended. Geez, those are both like to be able to get your friends to play a game with you for that long. Props to you, man. I try so hard.
Wow.
What is it?
Game came out in 2001.
Oh,
wow.
Dude, I can't. Orc Gang. I've had luck getting people into single player games, but when it comes to like an obscure multiplayer game that I need someone to play with, my friends will be gone after one match. I
try. Trying. Well, we haven't played Due Process in a while.
Yeah,
I like trying games. It's more just that my problem is that when I'm playing a single player game, and I like want to keep progressing in it, I feel like if like a week goes by and I'm always like joining people to play multiplayer games, I feel like I'm like not making any progress in the single player game, and I feel like stuck. That's mainly why I sometimes don't join in when someone's playing a multiplayer game.
No, I get what you're saying, and no, you're not who I had in mind. The Due Process. I wish we got more people to play Due Process with us, but that game, I think. We were kind of playing like it. I think it was still in beta, or it had just come out of beta. So Due Process is an indie game, so there's a ton more content now. So we should go back into it sometime. But
that much more. I mean, we were playing that in what, like August?
Yeah,
that was. I think it was early access when we were playing it. Is that? I'm looking on Steam now. It still says early access on Steam.
Yeah, Satanist, you're right. You did have help in that one of those games is the most popular game in the world, so that helps keep your friends interested.
I've still never played League. I had a bunch of friends in college that were really into it, but I never tried it with them.
It's it's not my cup of tea. I've tried multiple times.
I feel like part of it, and they said this to me before, is that because the matches are so long, especially when you're playing competitive, like it sucks to lose.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought that, like, because I've been getting, I don't want to say back into Rocket League because I only really played it here and there when it first came out. But like over the past couple months, I've been playing Rocket League with a few friends and enjoying it a lot more. And I think it's part of it is because the matches are short. Like it's 5 minutes. It feels long enough that you can go back and forth and catch up, but not so long that if you lose, it's like, just go to the next one. It's
Mm-hmm.
not like this huge investment of time to where if you lose at the very end, you feel like you just wasted an hour or however long a league match lasts.
It's yeah, that's the tough part. They're between like 40 and 55 minutes usually.
And I've never played any kind of MOBA, so it would be a totally new experience for me, not just like picking up a new shooter or whatever.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, you ready to wrap it up there?
Yeah, we can call it here.
All right, that sounds good to me. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks for joining us, everyone. It was a good
Yeah,
discussion.
thanks for letting me rant about video games and Cyberpunk. I'll let you follow me on Twitter. I'll let you know how the game is on Wednesday night.
Through Reddit comments only.
I only communicate through copy pastes. All right. I didn't set up an outro screen, so I'm just gonna end it. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate you hanging out and chatting. This was really fun. Steg, thank you for rushing home.
For sure. Yeah, I rush, man. Whenever.
All right, adios.
See you, folks. Bye bye.